Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and today we have another interview coming out of Gamescom. Now, the last couple of videos I did, I've talked about how it's been largely fluff pieces, talking about Dawntrail criticisms, maybe a gameplay detail or two, but he's otherwise been kind of tight-lipped about actual content plans or anything in regards to just direct content, all like housing glam questions, and the other ones are story-related stuff. Here, you can literally see the title. Final Fantasy XIV director Yoshida has big plans to build on Dawntrail's combat. There are some pretty interesting mentions in here that give us some teasers for 7.1 and beyond, and also talk about some philosophy changes for things like the difficulty of our alliance raids, which I think is especially important given the Final Fantasy XI theme that we have coming with Echoes of Vana'diel. Now, I am looking at this on PC Games N, however, I have all the ads and images turned off. They have a lot. So if you do go to the site, keep in mind you are going to get a lot of ads. And they're going to be all 14 ads. Mine were at the very least. But I've cleaned it up so that way we can go over this and it can be, well, a cleaner experience. So at Gamescom 2024, I asked 14 director Naoki Yoshida about combat content in Dawntrail, increasing the challenge, and 24-player Savage. Very important. There was a lot of confusion about a statement that Yoshi-P made regarding an Alliance raid Savage, where he talked about it kind of in tandem with the Occult Crescent and Shades Triangle, which is the name of our new exploration zone. And so there was like are they doing the Final Fantasy XI raid? Is it going to be Shades Triangle? Is it something like, it was just a lot of confusion and no one's really been sure exactly what he meant. I know that the person who did this interview specifically asked him to clarify because of that confusion. And I appreciate them for that. So 14 may have divided opinions on its slightly lower stakes story and sideline role, but there's one aspect everyone seems in unison on. The combat content and the new expansion, Dungeon Trials, Raid, Savages, and Extremes alike have all been incredibly well received. It combines the inventive and flashy design seen during Endwalker with more unique and challenging mechanics, and it's a ton of fun as a result. At Gamescom 2024, I sat down with game director Naoki Yoshida to ask about his plans for upcoming patches, which include the Final Fantasy XI adjacent Alliance raid and new 24-player Savage content. Oh, we're eating good with this one. Well, the story is often cited as the biggest reason why 14 is one of the best MMOs. I've loved the act of playing it as well. While I adore Endwalker's raids and Alliance raids narratively and aesthetically, it can certainly feel like too much of a walk in the park at times. Beautiful, meditative, and pleasing, but a little too relaxed. Indeed, Yoshida himself said prior to Dawntrail's launch that he felt Final Fantasy XIV combat content was too repetitive in Endwalker. His plan is to increase the variety of mechanics players see and hopefully push us all to think a bit more and build our own strategies to respond to fights. Yeah, we've seen a little bit too much strategy building in Party Finder. Maybe dial... No, it's fine. I don't mind there being a bunch of strats, but... Party Finder. Anyway, Dawntrail has certainly delivered so far, especially with its extreme trials, the endgame expert dungeons, and the first tier of the Arcadian. But that's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of a more fulfilling gameplay experience as the team builds towards the 8.0 expansion. As such, I asked Yoshida if the positive response to combat in Dawntrail has given him confidence in his plans to test players more. I like the block just as YouTube thumbnail. Of course, when the expansion first released, the level cap was raised, and that's really the starting line. I have to say that the players' response to the new mechanics is more positive than I was expecting. There are more players who like the mechanics than I anticipated. And so now, as we are creating the raids for 7.2, the second part of the Arcadian, we're going to be working on incorporating more unique experiences and surprising things, so I hope the players will enjoy that. Glad to hear it. There's more to come before we get there, of course. In patch 7.1, we will be having the Final Fantasy XI crossover Alliance raid, Echoes of Vana'diel. And we are also creating a 24-person Savage, which is shaping up to be really good. So there now, as you've seen, two separate statements that have been made in regards to two different pieces of content. Yoshida's mention of a 24-player Savage has sparked much discussion, so I asked whether it would be tied into either the Alliance raids or the new Bozia-style large-scale multiplayer content the team is working on, and whether Yoshida specifically wants to respond to concerns that Alliance's Endwalker's Alliance raids were a little too low peril. We like this interviewer. Us content people... Us people who do endgame, we like this interviewer. All right, send this person more. I didn't see who it was. Did it say it at the top? Does it say it at the bottom? I think it says it at the bottom. Say it at the top. Ken Alsop. Send Ken. Keep sending Ken to things. We like Ken. We advocate for Ken. All right. So firstly, with regards to the Alliance raid, It is designed as usual so that players can enjoy the experience. But having said that, we receive feedback the Alliance raids are getting too simple. And so we have designed it in a way that it's not going to be a walkthrough specifically in reference to the Final Fantasy XI raid. Currently, what we would say about the normal Alliance raid in terms of the difficulty is that it is quite standard. In the development team, we always have the discussion, and it's tough to decide on where we should draw the line in terms of compromise. We always need to consider what the average item level of the gear that the player has is going to be, and it's really difficult to predict. Sometimes the average item level can be above what's expected, and sometimes it falls below. But when we are testing content, we include members of our marketing and PR teams, and we found that there are times where we just wipe. And there are some times where we just end up running through it, and it's super easy. So it's really difficult to decide where we draw the line, and we're really torn all the time. However, this time when we were making the Alliance raid, we decided very clearly what we wanted. When a player goes through on their first playthrough of the Final Fantasy XI raid, they will probably wipe 3 times. That was what we felt was a good line to draw. It's not that we want to make it difficult, but we want to provide an exciting experience for the players, so I hope they will experience that. So, what we're getting from this is that we probably won't have as much of a walk in the park as we had with Endwalker. This sounds more akin to what we had with Ivalice, which is still one of my favorite Alliance raid series that we've gotten. Or maybe if you want to go back a little bit further, that's not too far off from what we had with the Weeping City of Mach and Dunskaith, which at the time, they apologized for the difficulty of Void Ark and said that the Weeping City was the difficulty they intended to put in and refused to budge on changing it. So, because they actually went back and nerfed Ivalice, I think they might consider that a step further than what they're talking about here. So Weeping City / Dunskaith is sounding more like, and I mean on release. Now we kind of just blow through it, but on release they were considered to be in a pretty good spot. So I'm excited for that. You know, I enjoyed the Endwalker raids. They were definitely too easy. We skipped too many things already, and within their own expansion were kind of rendered like just empty feeling in terms of actually doing it, other than getting to enjoy great voice lines like having every single boss tell you "come," every single one, and of course, you know, blowing kisses to to certain bosses as well. Maybe griefing our parties a little bit with that one, but it's all fun and games, right? On the other hand, the 24-person Savage, this is going to be a completely different boss. So it's going to be completely different content. Now, some of you may read that and assume that they mean that it's going to be the exploration content. But there's a statement later in this interview that tells us it's also different from that. That's certainly an exciting prospect, but it'll be interesting to see how the team has developed mechanics for a larger group to handle at once. Past Alliance raids have incorporated some really fun ideas, even as far back as the Crystal Tower, but many of these mechanics aren't as noticeable today due to the sheer power of the average player and their familiarity with the content. That almost makes me think we're getting Savage, specifically Circus Tower. I think if they were to go back and do any Crystal Tower singular one as a Savage, Circus Tower would be the correct one to do, because it's probably the single most like skipped by and like neutered. They're all neutered, but I think Circus Tower is the most neutered of the 3 by far. I don't think that's what they're doing, but if they were to do that, I'm just throwing that in. In closing, I asked Yoshida about the response to the recent Savage tier. It was certainly a delight, but players across the board found it was cleared relatively quickly, in particular due to very light DPS checks, meaning there wasn't as much need to optimize the play once you learn how to approach each fight's mechanics. Was this intentional to help players get into Savage? This we've already gotten an answer to. They've said that they essentially buffed classes and didn't rebalance the fights. I think he's not telling the whole truth, because the final fight, we went through the changes and looked at what would actually be different. You maybe shave off, depending on your comp, like 15 to 20 seconds. You don't shave off a whole minute like my team did. My team beat it with 57 seconds to spare. Week 1, that's a lot. So I think that it's not entirely the case. But he also reiterates, yes, the first tier is normally a lower difficulty. Look at Hesperos, though, man. Hesperos was pretty tight, I gotta admit. Pictum answer stood out, so we took that into account. Yes, we covered this in another interview, so he's just reiterating the same thing, so we don't really need to spend a whole lot of time going into this. He's just saying, yeah, we buffed a bunch of other jobs. Pictomancer was really strong, but then we didn't rebalance the content and made it a lot easier. And they didn't want to end up with an Abyssos style situation where they over buffed it. A miscalculation on our part resulted in the boss's HP being roughly 1% too high in comparison to previous 4th stage Savage raids. What he leaves out is that the raid team was so good that they added on a few percent. They always add on a few percentages to what the team can actually do. And they did that, and the team was so good that they added on too much. So their internal testing team was too good at the game. What a subtle flex. This led to many players struggling to clear it at launch and weaker jobs being discriminated against. And that's rarely seen even among the higher tiers of play in 14. That's not the only potential issue, however. There was also the possibility it could cause a bug and that the server could go down. What? What did you do? So we took that into account. Oh, well, they're saying that adjusting the value would introduce a potential unintended bug. Okay. I thought they were saying there was something on the back end that was causing that, or that was going to cause. No, it's a hypothetical that like changing more elements of the game at once, even if it's like, oh, we're just tweaking a number, that can still break stuff. No, he's completely right about that. Let's just keep it the way it is so players can enjoy the raid. But they expected really tough encounters, and it was a shame that the tier wasn't as tough as they were expecting. Here's the statement. Having said that, in patch 7.1, there will be the 24-person Savage content, and there will also be the latest Ultimate encounter, Futures Rewritten. So that's a pretty big bombshell drop right there. Now, for those of you still wondering whether it has to do with Shade's Triangle or the Occult Crescent, in another interview a little bit ago, maybe 4 to 6 weeks ago, Yoshida specifically stated that the Occult Crescent was aimed for patch 7.2x. 7.2x is, well, not 7.1, and Occult Crescent is part of Shade's Triangle. It's the name of the first zone, as was revealed at the Chinese Fan Festival. So, this is completely different from that. Unless they're planning on tying it together and introducing the series that has it, we're getting a 24-player Savage on top of an Ultimate, which I cry for the schedule for that. So we're currently predicting that Ultimate is November 26th, 2 weeks after the predicted date for 7.1, which would be November 12th. There's a 19-week gap normally between patches, sometimes 20. So November 26th is a very likely date because November 12th is 19 weeks after the launch of Dawntrail, the official launch, not early access, and then another 2 weeks. That's not great for Americans. We're only one place in the world. Not great for us. That would mean that about 4 to 6 weeks later, which would either fall right in Christmas, New Year line or right after the new year, that we would then have this. So not the greatest bunch of timings. And also, I mean, maybe getting off work will be easier for people who don't care about their families. They want it to take time off, they'll have it off already. Or they could use less days. Maybe it'll work out, you know? But yeah, that's gonna be interesting. 7.2 raids as well. They're creating a DPS check, so it's not gonna feel as loose. They're gonna make sure that they do a good job of creating content moving forward. If you enjoy, and then this is just the end of the interview, them just reiterating, Ken Alsop is a news writer for PC Games N. He wants to play everything that comes out, but keeps finding himself on old favorites. As such, you'll find him covering the latest updates for 14 and Terraria, with a deep dive into some of the biggest games like Baldur's Gate and Diablo 4. He especially loves RPG, Souls-likes, and roguelikes, and won't stop talking about Monster Hunter and Like a Dragon games. A master graduate in mathematics, you'll also find Ken playing the piano, cello, and guitar in his spare time. Ken W is what I'm calling him from now on. Yeah. So there it is. We're going to have a 24-player Savage raid in 7.1. We, of course, have the Ultimate, and they are more tightly tuning the DPS checks for a 7.2's Arcadian Savage release. So, I'm going to end this on one note. If you, week 1, Arcadian, and it's your first ever week 1, first of all, congratulations. Doesn't matter if the tier is easier or people tell you it's easier. It's kind of the same as like Uwu. Yes, it's the easiest Ultimate, but you should still be glad that you took on something that's above what you had already cleared in the game. That's something to enjoy. What I'll also say is this. Don't be on a high horse about it either. Because Ultimate is known for breaking statics that are on their high horses. And Abyssos was breaking statics that were on their high horses. So be proud of what you've done. Be ready for what comes next. because it's probably not going to go nearly as smoothly as this just did for you. Be very careful and test your friendships very carefully. Okay. With that, that's going to be a wrap for this interview. Thank you, PC Games N. Thank you again for the very good interview. Appreciate you, Ken. Did a good job. I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to get to the gym. It's going to be upper body day for me. So I'm ready to go. But let me know what you think in the comments section. What do you think our Alliance Raid content is going to be? Are you fearful or excited for Eden Ultimate? If you're only watching it, I don't care. I only want to hear about if you're doing it. If you're watching it, it's going to be exciting even if we're suffering. I know, because top was exciting for people watching and not for the people doing it. So if you plan on doing it, let me know what you think, okay? I'll see you in the next video. Until then, take care.